The helicopter blades chopped through the thick Afghan air as Team 7 prepared for what intelligence called a routine extraction mission. Petty Officer Sarah Chun checked her medical kit for the third time, her fingers moving automatically over bandages, tourniquets, and morphine injectors. Around her, 8 Navy SEALs loaded magazines and adjusted their gear with practiced efficiency. Remember, we got wounded friendlies 2 clicks inside hostile territory. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez briefed the team over the engine noise. Intel says light resistance, but we all know how reliable that is. Sarah caught the sideways glances from some of the newer team members. At 5'4" and weighing barely 125 pounds, she looked nothing like the stereotypical special operations warrior. Her medical corps insignia stood out among the trident pins, marking her as support rather than assault personnel. "Doc, you stay back with comms once we hit the ground," Rodriguez continued. "Let the operators handle the heavy lifting." Sarah nodded without complaint, though something in her gut told her this mission would be anything but routine. She had earned her place on these teams through 2 tours in Iraq and countless hours of advanced medical training. But some members still saw her as just another medic who happened to be female. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes till LZ. Looks quiet down there, but I'm seeing movement in the surrounding hills. Through the small window, Sarah watched the barren landscape rush past below. Afghanistan had a way of making even experienced operators nervous, and today felt different. The intelligence report had been too clean, too simple for a region where American forces had been taking increased casualties. 30 seconds, the pilot announced. The team performed final equipment checks. Sarah secured her medical bag and ensured her sidearm was properly seated in its holster. She carried a standard M9 pistol, unlike the customized rifles and carbines favored by the assault team members. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and debris. Rodriguez was first out, followed by his 7-man team. Sarah brought up the rear, her medical training automatically cataloging potential casualty collection points and evacuation routes as they moved away from the landing zone. The terrain was rougher than the briefing photos had suggested. Rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation provided minimal cover as they advanced toward the coordinates where 2 Marine reconnaissance soldiers had been pinned down for over 6 hours. "Movement, 2 o'clock," whispered Petty Officer Jake Morrison, the team's youngest member at barely 22. His voice carried the slight tension that came with limited combat experience. Rodriguez held up a closed fist, bringing the patrol to an immediate halt. Sarah dropped to one knee behind a boulder, scanning the area while staying ready to move if casualties developed. Through her scope, Rodriguez studied the distant hillside. Could be livestock. Areas supposed to be clear of civilians. The team resumed movement, but Sarah noticed the older veterans seemed more alert than the situation warranted. Petty Officer First Class David Kim, a 3-tour veteran, kept glancing toward the surrounding ridgelines with obvious concern. They covered 800 meters without incident before Rodriguez raised his hand again. This time, the reason was clear. Automatic weapons fire echoed from somewhere ahead, punctuated by the distinctive crack of American M4 rifles. "That's our boys," Rodriguez said into his radio. "Overwatch, this is ground team. We have contact at grid reference 774296. Moving to assist." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as they picked up the pace. Combat medicine required split-second decisions under the worst possible conditions, and she had learned to use the adrenaline rush rather than fight against it. The gunfire intensified as they crested a small ridge. Below them, 2 Marines had taken position behind what remained of a mud brick wall. Muzzle flashes from at least 3 positions indicated they were badly outnumbered and running low on ammunition. "Sniper, 11 o'clock high," Kim reported, pointing toward a distant ridgeline. "He's the one keeping them pinned." Rodriguez studied the situation through his binoculars. "Range is about 600 meters. That's extreme range for most of our weapons." Sarah watched the tactical problem develop. The team carried mostly short-barreled carbines optimized for close-quarters combat. Only 2 members had longer-range weapons, and neither was positioned for a clean shot at the sniper position. "We need to get closer," Rodriguez decided. "Morrison, take your fire team left. Kim, swing right with yours. I'll take Doc and provide overwatch." As the assault elements began their flanking movement, Sarah noticed something the others had missed. The sniper wasn't just keeping the Marines pinned. He was systematically destroying their equipment and supplies. Each shot was precisely aimed to disable rather than kill, suggesting a level of training that exceeded typical insurgent capabilities. "Chief," she said quietly, "that sniper knows what he's doing. This isn't random harassment fire." Rodriguez followed her gaze and nodded grimly. "You're right. He's playing with them." The flanking teams had moved less than 50 meters when the trap was sprung. Heavy machine gun fire erupted from multiple positions, catching both assault elements in a deadly crossfire. The mission had just become a fight for survival. Sarah watched in horror as Morrison went down immediately, clutching his leg and screaming for a medic. Kim's team scattered for cover, but they were caught in open ground with minimal protection. "Doc, stay here," Rodriguez ordered as he moved to support his trapped teammates. But Sarah could see what he couldn't from his position. The sniper had shifted targets and was now taking careful aim at the wounded Morrison. In seconds, the young SEAL would be dead unless someone acted immediately. Without hesitation, Sarah broke cover and sprinted toward the fallen operator. Bullets kicked up dirt around her boots as she ran, but her focus remained locked on reaching Morrison before the sniper could complete his shot. She dove behind the same rocky outcropping where Morrison had taken shelter, immediately beginning her assessment of his wound. The bullet had shattered his femur, causing massive bleeding that would prove fatal within minutes without immediate intervention. "Doc, what the hell are you doing?" Rodriguez's voice screamed through her earpiece. Sarah ignored the question as she worked to save Morrison's life. She applied a tourniquet above the wound site and prepared a pressure bandage, all while keeping her head down as bullets continued to snap overhead. But as she worked, her eyes kept drifting to Morrison's rifle. It was a custom-built weapon with a high-powered scope, designed for exactly the kind of long-range precision work needed to eliminate the sniper who was systematically destroying her team. Morrison followed her gaze and understood immediately. "Can you shoot?" he gasped through clenched teeth. Sarah looked at the weapon, then back toward the ridgeline where muzzle flashes continued to wink in the growing darkness. Her teammates were pinned down, taking casualties, and running out of options. The mission was failing, and good men were going to die unless someone made a hard choice. She picked up the rifle and checked the chamber. It was loaded and ready to fire. Sarah's hands moved over Morrison's rifle with surprising familiarity. The weapon was heavier than she expected, but the weight felt natural as she settled into a prone shooting position behind the rocks. Through the scope, she could see the muzzle flashes from the enemy's sniper position approximately 600 meters away. "Doc, negative on that rifle." Rodriguez's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Your job is medical support, not engaging targets." She ignored the order and began calculating windage and elevation. The light was fading fast, making target identification increasingly difficult. Around her, the gunfire continued as her teammates remained pinned in their exposed positions. Morrison grabbed her arm weakly. "The rifle zeroed for 600 yards, he whispered. "Winds coming from the east at maybe 10 knots. Sarah nodded, adjusting the scope accordingly. She had never told her teammates about her background before joining the Navy. Growing up in rural Montana, she had learned to shoot almost before she could walk. Her father had been a Marine sniper in Vietnam, and he had passed along skills that went far beyond basic marksmanship. Through the scope, she caught a glimpse of movement on the distant ridge. The enemy sniper was repositioning for another shot, probably targeting Kim's team, which was trapped behind insufficient cover. She estimated the range again, accounting for the angle and elevation difference. "I've got eyes on the target," she reported calmly. "Doc, I said stand down," Rodriguez replied tersely. "We've got air support inbound." Sarah checked her watch. Air support was at least 15 minutes away, and her teammates wouldn't survive that long under sustained fire. The enemy had chosen their ambush site perfectly, with overlapping fields of fire that made movement nearly impossible. She steadied her breathing and acquired the target through her scope. The enemy sniper was partially concealed behind rocks, but she could see enough of his upper torso to make the shot possible. At this range, with these conditions, she would have one opportunity before he spotted her muzzle flash and returned fire. Kim's voice came through the radio, tight with pain. I'm hit. Took one in the shoulder. Team 2 is combat ineffective. That settled it for Sarah. She aligned the crosshairs, controlled her breathing, and began the slow squeeze that her father had taught her 20 years earlier. The rifle kicked against her shoulder as the shot broke cleanly. Through the scope, she watched the enemy sniper slump forward and become still. The harassment fire from his position ceased immediately. Target eliminated, she reported matter-of-factly. The radio went silent for several seconds before Rodriguez responded. Say again, Doc? Sniper is down. Your team should be able to move now. Almost immediately, the tactical situation began to improve. Without the long-range threat keeping them pinned, Kim's team was able to shift to better cover. Rodriguez moved his element closer to the trapped Marines, providing suppressive fire against the remaining enemy positions. But Sarah's problems were just beginning. By eliminating the sniper, she had revealed her position to the other enemy fighters. Bullets began impacting the rocks around her with increasing accuracy as they tried to neutralize the new threat. She grabbed Morrison under his arms and began dragging him toward better cover. The wounded SEAL was losing consciousness from blood loss, but he was still alive thanks to her medical intervention. Now she needed to keep both of them alive long enough for extraction. Doc, can you see the machine gun position? Rodriguez asked. It's about 400 meters to your left. Sarah repositioned herself and scanned through the scope. She found the machine gun nest built into a natural cave formation. 2 fighters were visible, one operating the weapon while another fed ammunition belts. The position was well protected and difficult to assault directly. I see them, she confirmed. Think you can make that shot? Sarah studied the target through her scope. The range was shorter than her first shot, but the angle was more challenging. The machine gunners were partially concealed, and she would need to wait for them to expose themselves during a reload or repositioning. Affirmative, but I need them to move. Rodriguez understood immediately. All teams, prepare for suppressive fire on my mark. Draw their attention away from Doc's position. The coordinated fire from both SEAL teams forced the machine gunners to hunker down momentarily, then return fire with renewed intensity. During the exchange, the primary gunner shifted position slightly, exposing his head and shoulders for approximately 2 seconds. Sarah took the shot. The machine gun went silent, its crew eliminated by a single precise round. The remaining enemy positions began to falter without the heavy weapons support that had made their ambush so effective. Outstanding shooting, Doc. Kim's voice carried genuine admiration despite his wound. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Before Sarah could answer, Rodriguez's team reached the trapped Marines. Both reconnaissance soldiers were wounded but stable, requiring immediate medical attention that only Sarah could provide. Doc, we need you down here now, Rodriguez called. Sarah looked at Morrison, who was barely conscious but stabilized for the moment. Can you watch our 6 while I work on the Marines? Morrison nodded weakly, accepting his sidearm from Sarah. Go to your job. Sarah gathered her medical supplies and low-crawled toward Rodriguez's position. The remaining enemy fighters were withdrawing, but sporadic gunfire continued from several directions. She reached the Marines just as one of them went into shock from blood loss. The next 20 minutes tested every aspect of her medical training. Both Marines had suffered multiple gunshot wounds, requiring emergency surgery under combat conditions. Sarah worked methodically, stopping bleeding, administering fluids, and stabilizing fractures while bullets occasionally snapped overhead. Helicopter inbound. 2 minutes, the radio announced. Sarah looked up from her patients. Both Marines would survive, though they needed immediate evacuation to a surgical facility. Morrison's condition had stabilized, and the rest of the team had suffered only minor injuries. But as she began preparing her patients for transport, movement on the ridgeline caught her attention. Through Morrison's abandoned rifle scope, she could see additional enemy fighters moving into position. They were setting up what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, aimed directly at the incoming evacuation helicopter. The aircraft was flying directly into a trap, and there was no time to warn them off. Sarah had perhaps 30 seconds before the helicopter came within range of the RPG. She grabbed the rifle again, knowing this would be the most difficult shot of the night. The range was over 700 meters, the light was almost gone, and she would be shooting at a partially concealed target while under stress. Miss, and the helicopter crew would die along with everyone waiting for evacuation. Sarah settled behind the rifle one more time, knowing that everything depended on this single shot. The distinctive thrum of rotor blades grew louder as the evacuation helicopter approached from the east. Sarah could see its navigation lights through Morrison's rifle scope as she tracked the RPG team on the distant ridge. The enemy fighters were positioned perfectly to ambush the aircraft during its most vulnerable approach phase. Overwatch, this is ground team, Rodriguez called urgently. Wave off the bird. We have RPG threat on the ridgeline. Static filled the radio for several seconds before the pilot responded. Ground team, negative on wave off. We have wounded requiring immediate evac. Give me a clear LZ. Sarah estimated the helicopter was less than 90 seconds from the kill zone. At 700 meters, shooting uphill in failing light, she would need to compensate for bullet drop, wind drift, and the stress of knowing that failure meant multiple casualties. Through the scope, she watched the RPG team make final preparations. The primary gunner was positioning his weapon while his assistant prepared the rocket-propelled grenade. Both men were experienced fighters who understood the timing required for a successful ambush. Doc, can you take the shot? Rodriguez asked quietly. Sarah studied the target picture. The enemy gunner was partially concealed behind rocks, with only his head and shoulders visible. The assistant was more exposed, but eliminating him would not prevent the primary threat from firing his weapon. Range is extreme, and the light is going fast, she replied honestly. But I can see the primary target. Around her, the SEAL team maintained security while she focused on the shot. Morrison had been moved to better cover, and both wounded Marines were stabilized for transport. Everything now depended on preventing the helicopter from flying into an ambush. Sarah controlled her breathing and began the careful process her father had taught her decades earlier. She estimated wind speed by watching vegetation movement, calculated bullet drop based on range and ammunition characteristics, and adjusted for the uphill angle that would affect trajectory. The helicopter pilot's voice filled her earpiece. Ground team, I have visual on your position. Beginning final approach. Through the scope, Sarah saw the RPG gunner settle into his firing position. He was tracking the helicopter's approach, waiting for the optimal moment when the aircraft would be unable to maneuver effectively. She estimated he would fire within the next 20 seconds. I have the shot, she announced calmly. Take it, Rodriguez responded immediately. Sarah aligned the crosshairs on the enemy gunner's center mass, the only part of his body clearly visible through the scope. At this range, any shot that struck the target would likely be fatal, but she needed to ensure he could not trigger his weapon even if wounded. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder as she fired. Through the scope, she watched the RPG gunner collapse backward, his weapon falling useless among the rocks. The assistant fighter grabbed for the RPG, but he was exposed now and clearly panicked by his partner's sudden death. Target down, Sarah reported. Assistant is retrieving the weapon. The second fighter was fumbling with the unfamiliar RPG system, trying to bring it into operation before the helicopter completed its approach. Sarah worked the rifle's bolts smoothly, chambering a fresh round while maintaining her sight picture. Her second shot ended the threat permanently. Both enemy fighters were eliminated, and the evacuation could proceed safely. Overwatch, this is ground team. LZ is clear for immediate landing. The helicopter touched down in a swirl of dust and debris 60 meters from their position. The crew chief jumped out with a stretcher team, moving quickly to load the most seriously wounded patients first. Sarah gathered her medical supplies and prepared to move Morrison to the aircraft. The young SEAL was conscious again, though weak from blood loss and pain medication. Doc, he said quietly as she helped him sit up. That was some seriously impressive shooting. Where did you train? Before Sarah could answer, Rodriguez appeared beside them. His expression was unreadable as he looked between Sarah and the rifle she had used to eliminate multiple enemy threats. We'll talk about this later, he said simply. Right now, let's get everyone home. The evacuation proceeded smoothly, with all wounded personnel loaded aboard the helicopter within minutes. Sarah remained behind with the rest of the team to secure the area and await secondary transport. As the helicopter lifted off and disappeared into the darkness, Rodriguez finally addressed what had just happened. "Doc, I've been leading teams for 8 years," he said. "I've never seen shooting like that under combat conditions. Those were expert-level shots at extreme range." The other team members gathered around, their faces showing a mixture of admiration and confusion. They had worked with Sarah for months, seeing her only as a skilled medic who happened to be female. Her combat performance had shattered their preconceptions completely. "I learned to shoot growing up in Montana," Sarah said simply. "My father was a Marine sniper in Vietnam." Kim, his arm in a field dressing, shook his head slowly. "That doesn't explain what we just saw. You were making shots that most trained snipers couldn't make under ideal conditions." Sarah remained quiet, but Rodriguez was not finished with his questions. As team leader, he needed to understand the full capabilities of every member under his command. "Doc, what's your complete background? And don't give me the abbreviated version." Sarah looked around at her teammates, realizing that her secret was now completely exposed. She had spent her entire military career downplaying her marksmanship abilities to avoid being pigeonholed as anything other than a medical specialist. "Before joining the Navy, I competed in long-range precision rifle competitions," she admitted. "I held several state records in Montana and placed second at nationals 3 years running." The team exchanged glances. Morrison whistled softly despite his pain medication. "Why didn't you ever mention this?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah's answer revealed the complexity of being a female operator in a male-dominated field. "Because every time I demonstrated shooting ability, people stopped seeing me as a medic. I worked too hard to earn my medical credentials to be reassigned as just another shooter." Rodriguez nodded slowly, beginning to understand. In the special operations community, exceptional marksmanship was both a valuable asset and a potential career limitation. Sarah had deliberately concealed her abilities to maintain her medical role. "But you could have been our designated marksman all along," Kim pointed out. "I didn't want to be your designated marksman," Sarah replied firmly. "I wanted to be your medic who could also shoot when necessary." The distinction was important, and Rodriguez recognized its significance immediately. Sarah had not been seeking glory or recognition for her shooting skills. She had simply used them when the mission required it, then returned to her primary medical responsibilities. As they waited for extraction, Rodriguez made a decision that would change the team's operational dynamics permanently. Sarah had proven herself under the worst possible conditions, demonstrating skills that were too valuable to ignore or downplay. "Doc," he said quietly, "from now on, you'll carry specialized equipment. You're still our primary medic, but you're also our long-range precision asset." Sarah nodded acceptance, knowing that her career had just taken an unexpected turn. She had spent years hiding her marksmanship abilities, but combat had a way of revealing the truth about people regardless of their intentions. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the night air as their extraction arrived. As they prepared to leave, Rodriguez looked once more toward the ridgeline where Sarah had eliminated multiple threats with expert precision. "Outstanding work tonight, Doc," he said simply. "Outstanding work." 3 weeks after the Afghanistan mission, Sarah found herself sitting across from Captain James Mitchell, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Group 2. The meeting had been scheduled without explanation, leaving her wondering if her unconventional actions during the rescue operation had created problems. "Petty Officer Chun," Captain Mitchell began, reviewing her service record on his computer screen. "Your performance during Operation Granite Shield has generated considerable interest at higher levels." Sarah maintained her composure, unsure whether the attention was positive or negative. In the special operations community, standing out could be either a career advancement opportunity or a career-ending problem. Chief Rodriguez submitted a detailed after-action report. Mitchell continued. "According to his account, you eliminated 4 confirmed enemy combatants at ranges exceeding 600 meters under challenging conditions." The captain turned his screen around so Sarah could see her updated personnel file. New entries had been added documenting her marksmanship capabilities and combat performance. "The question is what to do with this information," Mitchell said. "You've been serving as a medical specialist, but your shooting performance suggests capabilities that extend far beyond that role." Sarah had been dreading this conversation. She knew that exceptional performance in one area often led to reassignment away from chosen specialties. Too many good medics had been moved to pure combat roles, leaving critical medical positions unfilled. "Sir, I request to remain in my current position as team medic," she said directly. "I believe I can serve both functions effectively without compromising either role." Mitchell leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "That's an unusual request. Most operators would jump at the chance for a designated marksman position. I spent 4 years in medical training, sir. That expertise shouldn't be wasted." The captain nodded slowly. Chief Rodriguez made the same argument in his report. "He recommends that you remain as primary medical support while taking on additional responsibilities as team precision marksman." Sarah felt relief beginning to build, but she knew the conversation was not finished. Mitchell pulled out another folder, this one marked with security classifications that indicated high-level interest. "There's been discussion about forming specialized teams that combine medical and precision capabilities," he explained. "Personnel who can provide both combat medicine and long-range support in complex operations." The concept was intriguing, but also concerning. Sarah recognized that such assignments would likely involve the most dangerous and sensitive missions, where conventional support options were unavailable. The program would require additional training, Mitchell continued. Advanced sniper school, specialized medical procedures, and integration with intelligence gathering operations. Sarah listened carefully as the captain outlined what would essentially be a new career path. The Navy was recognizing that modern operations required personnel with multiple specialized capabilities, particularly in small team environments where every member needed diverse skills. "What would be the time commitment, sir?" 6 months of additional training, followed by assignment to a new team structure. You would retain your medical certification while gaining formal sniper qualifications. Mitchell allowed her time to process the information before continuing. "However, there is one significant complication. The program is experimental, and there are questions about whether female personnel can physically handle the demands." Sarah had encountered this attitude throughout her career. Despite consistently demonstrating equal or superior performance, she still faced skepticism about her physical capabilities. "Sir, my performance record speaks for itself," she replied evenly. "I agree completely," Mitchell said. "But you would be the first female participant in this program. That brings both opportunities and challenges." The captain explained that her success or failure would likely determine whether other women would have similar opportunities. The pressure was substantial, but Sarah had dealt with such expectations throughout her military career. "When would training begin?" she asked. "Next month, if you accept. The first phase would be at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, followed by advanced training at various classified facilities." Sarah realized this was the opportunity she had never dared to request directly. Instead of being forced to choose between her medical expertise and marksmanship abilities, she was being offered the chance to develop both at the highest levels. "I accept the assignment, sir." Mitchell smiled for the first time during the meeting. "I was hoping you would say that." Chief Rodriguez specifically requested that you remain with his team after training completion. The captain handed her a thick package of training materials and administrative forms. "You'll have 1 week to complete preparations before reporting to Coronado. Any questions?" Sarah reviewed the training schedule quickly. The program was intensive, covering everything from advanced ballistics to emergency surgery procedures. She would be pushed to her physical and mental limits while proving herself in yet another male-dominated environment. "Sir, what happens if I don't meet the standards?" Mitchell's expression became serious. "Then, you return to your current position with no negative impact on your career. But failure would also mean the program gets reevaluated, potentially affecting future opportunities for other women." Sarah understood the implications completely. She would be carrying the expectations of every female service member who might want similar opportunities in the future. 2 days later, Sarah stood on the beach at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, watching the sun rise over San Diego Bay. Around her, 12 other personnel prepared for the beginning of what instructors called the most challenging training program in the Navy. She was the only woman in the group, a fact that several male participants had already commented on with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. The instructors had made it clear that gender would not be a consideration during training. everyone would meet the same standards or be eliminated. Senior Chief Petty Officer David Harrison, the lead instructor, addressed the group with typical special operations directness. Over the next 6 months, we will determine who has what it takes to serve in the most demanding positions the Navy has to offer, he announced. Medical specialists who can perform surgery under fire. Precision marksmen who can save lives instead of just taking them. Personnel who can operate independently in any environment. Harrison's eyes swept across the group, pausing briefly on Sarah before continuing. 50% of you will not complete this program. Of those who do finish, only the top graduates will receive operational assignments. The rest will return to their previous duties with new skills, but no guarantee of specialized roles. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of nerves and determination that accompanied every significant challenge in her career. She had proven herself in combat, but training environments often presented different obstacles. Training begins in 30 minutes, Harrison concluded. Any questions? No one spoke. Sarah shouldered her gear and prepared for what she knew would be the most difficult months of her military career. Success would open doors that had never existed for women in special operations. Failure would close them for years to come. As the group moved toward the training facility, Sarah caught a glimpse of the Pacific Ocean beyond the base perimeter. Somewhere out there, other teams were conducting the kinds of missions she hoped to join. In 6 months, she would either be qualified to join them or returning to her previous life with new skills and disappointed hopes. The training was about to begin. 6 months later, Sarah stood at attention in the same conference room where her journey had begun. Captain Mitchell reviewed the final training reports while she waited to learn her fate. Of the 13 personnel who had started the program, only 7 remained. She was still the only woman. Petty Officer Chun, Mitchell began, his tone revealing nothing about the outcome. Your final scores are impressive. You finished 2nd overall in marksmanship, 1st in medical procedures under stress, and 3rd in combined operations integration. Sarah maintained her composure, but internally, she felt a surge of satisfaction. The training had been brutal, testing every aspect of her physical and mental capabilities. She had been eliminated from the program twice, once for a failed navigation exercise and once for missing time standards on a combat medical scenario, only to be reinstated when she successfully completed makeup testing. More importantly, Mitchell continued, your instructors report that you demonstrated the judgment and leadership qualities necessary for independent operations in hostile environments. The captain turned to face her directly. You have successfully completed the program with distinction. You are now qualified for assignment to Special Operations Medical Support Teams. Sarah allowed herself a small smile of relief. The months of training had pushed her beyond what she thought possible, but she had achieved her goal of becoming the Navy's first female dual-qualified medical precision specialist. Your first assignment will be with a joint task force operating in West Africa, Mitchell explained. The team conducts medical assistance missions in areas where conventional forces cannot operate safely. Sarah nodded, understanding that such missions would require both her medical expertise and her newly enhanced combat skills. The training had prepared her for exactly these kinds of operations where small teams worked without backup in potentially hostile environments. One final matter, Mitchell said, pulling out another folder. Chief Rodriguez has submitted a request for you to return to his team for a specific operation. He argues that your familiarity with Team 7's procedures makes you the optimal choice for the mission. The captain explained that Rodriguez's team had been tasked with a complex rescue operation in Syria, where American medical personnel had been captured by enemy forces. The mission would require both combat expertise and medical capabilities to treat potential casualties during the rescue attempt. The choice is yours, Mitchell said. You can begin your assignment with the Joint Task Force, or you can return to Team 7 for this operation and join the task force afterward. Sarah considered both options carefully. The Joint Task Force represented the future of her career and the opportunity to help establish programs for other women. But Team 7 had become her family, and Rodriguez had supported her through every stage of her development. I request assignment to Team 7 for the rescue operations, sir. Mitchell nodded approvingly. I thought you might choose that option. Chief Rodriguez will brief you on the mission details this afternoon. 2 hours later, Sarah sat in the familiar briefing room with her original teammates. Morrison was back to full duty, his leg wound completely healed. Kim's shoulder had recovered without complications. The team looked exactly as she remembered, except for their expressions when they looked at her. "Doc's back," Rodriguez announced unnecessarily. "And she's been upgraded." Sarah now carried a customized rifle system designed specifically for her size and shooting style. Her medical kit had been expanded with advanced trauma surgery equipment. Most importantly, her role had been officially recognized as dual-purpose rather than just medical support. "Mission overview," Rodriguez began, activating the briefing screen. 3 American medical workers were captured 6 weeks ago while operating a clinic in northern Syria. Intelligence indicates they are being held at a compound approximately 40 kilometers from the Turkish border. The satellite imagery showed a heavily fortified position with multiple buildings and extensive security measures. Sarah studied the layout, automatically identifying potential casualty collection points and medical treatment areas. The hostages include Dr. Maria Santos, a trauma surgeon, and 2 nurses, Rodriguez continued. All 3 are civilians with no military training. They will require immediate medical attention due to their captivity conditions. Sarah understood why she had been specifically requested for this mission. Treating civilians who had endured weeks of imprisonment would require both medical expertise and the psychological skills to calm terrified people under combat conditions. Primary concern is enemy sniper positions on the surrounding hillsides, Rodriguez explained. Intelligence reports at least 2 trained marksmen with quality equipment positioned to cover the compound approaches. The tactical problem was complex. The rescue team would need to neutralize long-range threats while simultaneously breaching the compound and securing the hostages. Sarah's dual capabilities would be essential for mission success. "Doc, your role will be overwatch and medical support," Rodriguez explained. "You'll provide precision fire to eliminate sniper threats, then move to the compound for hostage treatment and evacuation preparation." Sarah studied the mission timeline and understood the challenges involved. She would need to engage targets at extreme range under time pressure, then immediately transition to treating potentially critical patients. Everything she had learned during 6 months of training would be tested in a single operation. "Questions?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah reviewed the intelligence reports one more time, focusing on the enemy sniper positions and the compound layout. The mission was dangerous and complex, but it was exactly the kind of operation she had trained for. "When do we deploy, Chief?" "Tomorrow night. We insert by helicopter 40 kilometers from the target, then approach on foot. Timeline is tight. We need to be in position before dawn." The briefing continued for another hour, covering contingency plans, communication procedures, and evacuation options. As it concluded, Sarah realized how much had changed since her first mission with Team 7. 6 months earlier, she had been seen as just a medic who happened to be female. Now she was recognized as a full team member with critical specialized capabilities. The change had come through demonstrated performance under the worst possible conditions. That evening, as she prepared her equipment for the mission, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had never intended to become a precision marksman, but circumstances had revealed capabilities she didn't know she possessed. Morrison approached as she cleaned her rifle. His leg showed no signs of the wound she had treated under fire in Afghanistan. "Doc," he said quietly, "I never properly thank you for saving my life, and for teaching me that assumptions about people are usually wrong." Sarah looked up from her weapon maintenance. "You would have done the same for me." Morrison shook his head. "Maybe, but I wouldn't have been able to make those shots. You saved the whole team that night." As the team prepared for their final mission together before Sarah's transfer to the Joint Task Force, she realized that proving herself had been only the beginning. Now she needed to help other women follow the path she had opened. The rescue mission in Syria would be her final test with Team 7, but it would also be the first step in a larger mission to change how the military viewed the capabilities of female special operations personnel. Tomorrow night, she would once again prove that skill and determination mattered more than assumptions about gender. And this time, her success would help open doors for countless other women who wanted to serve at the highest levels of military operations. Sarah completed her equipment check and prepared for what she knew would be the most important mission of her career. Not just because lives depended on her performance, but because the future of women in special operations hung in the balance.